Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project Podcast. My name is Patrick Cummings. As always, I'm here with E.C. Sinkowski. Every week on the show, we aim to simplify the science of nutrition, health, and fitness, cutting through the noise to focus on the principles and practices that will help you perform better, feel better, and live better. Hello, how are you, E.C.?
Hello, I am wonderful. How are you?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We got our favorite format. We got Quick Bites. Quick Bites is when we take some of the wonderful questions that listeners send us or send you. And perhaps these questions aren't worthy of an entire episode, but they are still worthy to answer. So we're going to try to do 5 questions in about 5 minutes each. Cool?
Yeah, let's give it a whirl.
I always like to ask for folks if they have questions out there, what's the best way to get a question to you so that we perhaps might get it into a quick bite?
OptimizeMeNutrition.com/email is how to get on my email list. And then if you click reply to any emails I send out, that's the best way. People often send via Instagram, and it's just so hard to keep track of all the Instagram stuff. I try, but the email is definitely a better way to get on the queue or in the queue.
Love it. All right. So a couple of the questions we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about carbonated beverage and its increased stroke risk, or if there's an increased stroke risk, that's hard to say, with carbonated beverages. We're talking about, if I'm full at the end of the day, do I keep eating just so I can hit my 800 gram challenge, and something called adiposity set points. So those are just 3 of the 5 subjects we're going to cover. So let's just dive in, yeah?
Let's do it.
All right. This first question we've got is from Trish. Here's what she sent. I recently saw my naturopath and we were chatting about weight loss. She said that I should be eating only 3 meals a day to cut out all snack meals, since that will put me in a quote unquote fat loss phase for more hours in the day. I thought it was an interesting perspective. She said this will help me lose weight irrespective of the total amount of calories per day. Also interesting. I'm curious on the science data to back this up.
Well, this is an interesting one because your naturopath is most likely correct, practically speaking, but wrong mechanistically. And there is no scientific evidence to back this up, especially that sentence, irrespective of the total amount of calories per day. In fact, that's where we have good amount of evidence that it certainly is going to be the calories per day that dictate weight loss. Now, what is ultimately going to happen when most people switch to 3 meals a day only, and not eat any snacks, is they're going to reduce their calories. I remember I did a kind of a survey on Instagram of like, how many times a day do you eat? And I think the average answer was 7. Now that's anytime something goes in your mouth. That doesn't mean that they were always eating meals, but it could be a snack, could be a beverage, in between meals, all of that stuff. So you want to think about it as if you were just to take something like 7 times a day when you're eating and you now cut it down to 3, for most everybody, you are just by default are going to reduce your calories. And so I actually think the naturopath's recommendation is a good way. I mean, it's not the way that I typically recommend, but can be a good short form way to get people going in the right direction is, hey, just have your basic meals. Guess what? It's going to help control quantity, cut down all the snacks, and you will lose weight. Now, again, why you would be losing weight is you're going to be in a caloric deficit. The only way to lose weight is to create a caloric deficit. So this is what's a little bit not so great about this statement, is there is a lot of stuff out there in social media land floating around that suggests you're going to lose weight in some other mechanism besides cutting calories. And no, that is incorrect. And that's how we know that are from these metabolic ward studies. Again, Kevin Hall, the prolific researcher on obesity, does. Metabolic ward studies are so powerful because they basically lock them in a hospital-like setting. They give them a certain amount of food. They can exactly look at the calories, and they can see what controls weight loss. Conversely, a lot of research that is done when people are just sort of living at their house and reporting what they eat. I think we just talked about the fact of all the different ways that can go wrong. We don't really get a handle on exactly what they're eating, and therefore we get these different results, but we certainly know that calories drive weight loss. And I'm just going to say it again because there's so much confusion out there. The only way you lose weight is by creating a caloric deficit. Now, you can do that, of course, by reducing food. It could be also by increasing activity, but that is the way that we lose weight. And so if you are losing weight, you want to think about, okay, what habits did I create that resulted in that caloric deficit? It might be that I cut down on the number of times I ate per day. It might be that I'm eating more fruits and vegetables, so I'm not eating as much processed food. It might be that I cut out sugar-sweetened beverages and I tended to overconsume them. But at the end of the day, if you're driving weight loss, you've created a caloric deficit.
Yeah, this advice reminds me a little bit of what you've talked about with fasting, where it's like, okay, only eat between 11 and 4. It's like, okay, chances are that just means you're going to be eating less because you just close the window on when you allow yourself to eat. So 3 meals a day, that's the only thing you're allowed to do? Yeah, I can see that.
Totally. exactly.
Yep. Next question is from Christine. She asks, what do you think about the new study that is saying that if you consume too many carbonated beverages, this may increase your stroke risk by 22%? They did not differentiate between sugar-free and sugar beverages, but are saying 2 or more servings of either increases your risk. It's from the Interstroke Research Project.
Yeah, I think this study came out last year, 2024, from what I saw. I think she's already hit the nail on the head. I love it. She already knows her answer. Mm-hmm. They did not differentiate between sugar-free and sugar beverages. And so this is the thing, is that carbonated beverages as a really broad category includes a lot of different things, from seltzer water, Diet Coke, to then also sugar-sweetened beverages. And so this is a big limitation of the study, is that they are treating them the same. I'm going to tell you that most people who are drinking carbonated beverages, it's going to be sugar-sweetened beverages. And so I'm going to say that the reason why this increase exists is that most of those beverages that they're looking at are going to be something like a true Coke full of sugar or whatever it might be, Sprite, etc. Also, another limitation of this study is that they did not adjust for the total calories someone is eating. And this is very classic of these association studies, where again, they just sort of ask the people, how many sodas do you drink per day? And the person checks off 1 or 2, and they just kind of do the association based on the frequency of the soda consumption. But oftentimes, as we have discussed quite recently, we're eating too many calories because of all of these processed foods. And so when people are having 1 or 2 sodas a day, they very likely are having too many calories overall. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that too many calories overall is what's really driving the increase in the stroke risk, not necessarily that a person had, let's say, a sugar-sweetened beverages, 1 cup of that within the context of a whole food diet that was the appropriate number of calories. So I think really the underlying mechanism here to be concerned with is that sugar-sweetened beverages tend to increase stroke risk, and it's specifically because sugar-sweetened beverages tend to add too many calories to the diet. And so that's really what I would walk away with looking at this, not walk away with, okay, I'll never have Diet Coke or I'll never have seltzer water or anything like that. And I do think, though, Christine brings up a really great point here, is that when you hear these association studies really drilling into the word that they said is important. In fact, I had another question in the queue, and I think I've answered it years ago on an email, that there's also a concern about, let's say, carbonated beverages and bone density. And it turns out, again, we don't really need to worry about seltzer water, but typically people that are having more sugar-sweetened beverages like cola in their diet, guess what? They aren't getting as much of all of the nutrients that we need for bone density. So we do really have to kind of laser in and look at this and be like, is this specific to the drink that I am actually drinking? And if you're not having a lot of cola and it's more the seltzer water or Diet Coke, I wouldn't be concerned.
When you talk about the increase of calories that tend to come with the sugary beverages, and this is probably a yes to both of these, but is it more because those drinks literally have more calories than either a sugar-free or a glass of water? Mm-hmm. Or is it that the sugar beverages, the soda, tends to come alongside the ultra-processed food or the heavily caloric foods? Is it that like they tend to travel together and that's why there's that issue, or is it because just simply the drinks themselves have more calories than we need?
Yes, I would say both of those, but I would say probably the primary reason is that it's so easy to consume a lot of calories in drink form.
Yep, got it.
It's just so easy to down 24 ounces of Coke and you're not full. So then you might reach for the processed food. And so there you go. But yeah, it's just the lack of satiety and the quickness at which we consume those calories. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Next question is from Haley. Do I need to keep eating past fullness to hit my 800 grams? Everything I have put into my mouth today has gone towards my 800 grams, protein or fiber goals. And at the end of the day, I'm not even close to 600 grams and I am stuffed. I hit my protein and fiber early on and now feel like I need to binge eat fruit before bed. And that just doesn't feel right. Some additional context. I am on GLP-1 medication for weight loss, but I am using your nutrition advice to steer me through this journey so I can hopefully maintain my weight and habits once I'm able to get off the medication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I have to kind of take this question in 2 parts. The one is going to be sort of the basic answer for people that are not on GLP-1s. There is some similarity, but let's just start with that case. I don't really want people to stuff themselves. There's no need to stand in front of the fridge at 9 p.m. eating a basket of strawberries in the name of the 800-gram challenge. I mean, I love this spirit, but that's not the intent. That is not the intent.
Sometimes I'll grab a handful of blueberries just to get me across the line.
Just get you across the line. Yeah, there's no need to force feed grams at night for the sake of the number. I think for a lot of people, again, not on GLP-1s, the reason that and I've heard this from people, again, who aren't on GLP-1s, which is why I'm bringing it up. The reason that you're, having a hard time hitting the number is more of an issue of habit change and prioritization of what you're eating across the day than it really is too much food. Now, I also say that with some grace that habit change takes time. You shouldn't beat yourself up if you're starting the 800-gram challenge and you're at 400 or 500 grams. We're just going to look at this over time. We're going to start adding things. And I think, again, with time, you're going to see that 800 grams is a quite reasonable and okay volume to do, even though in the beginning, we're not going to be force feeding our grams past, satiety. So that's the first thing. In Haley's case now, dealing with kind of the GLP-1 context, GLP-1s, they're so powerful as a drug because they are finally helping people control satiety. So it's not surprising that she feels so stuffed on this lower number of grams. And it's probably also unrealistic that she is going to be able to hit the 800 grams as well as even my protein targets while she's on the GLP-1s. Now, I do love that she says that she's trying to use, the whole food nutrition advice that I put out there so that maybe she can maintain her weight and her habits for going off the medication. Certainly that is going to be your best chance to get off the medication, is to build the habits now around these really satisfying whole foods such that you're able to maintain that when you start coming off. What they will typically do is they're typically going to start tapering your dose, lowering it a little bit at a time. And as they do that, what you want to look for is trying to increase your fruit and vegetable and trying to increase your protein consumption before you look to adding those processed foods. So you're going to think about it as, I want to try to get up to my 800 grams. I want to try to get up to my protein target as I'm weaning off the drug, such that we have this really healthy volume and base that's really satisfying, such that you are going to be able to get off the drug entirely. Again, the research doesn't suggest that many people will be able to do that. I don't want to be bearer of bad news or any of that stuff. I think it's certainly worth a shot. Certainly focusing on whole foods is going to be your best shot to do that. And so you really want to capitalize on fruits and veggies, and protein really help with satiety. But yeah, at this stage, it's just that as you continue to taper off the drug, you're going to want to try to increase it as you go.
Got it. All right, next question is from Raylene. Here's what she sent over. I was mostly interested in your thoughts and what the research says about adiposity set points. An expert states that we have a certain genetic set point for weight and adiposity, and then our lifestyle can lead us to a state that increases that set point. What I really want to hear your take on is whether the research shows that set points never decrease. So if we increase our weight and body fat for a significant period of time, we may have increased our body's set point permanently.
Yeah, set point theory. Another way to say set point theory is whether or not your genetics have you stuck at a certain weight. I think the example that it's always given to explain set point theory is much like a thermostat controlling a room, that you have this set temperature in the room, and it's either the heat or the air conditioning that comes on to make sure that you stay at that set temperature. So here, then, relating it back to body weight, it's the idea that your genetics will kind of raise and lower your metabolism to keep you at some genetically predetermined weight. And of course, the thought process here is if you lose weight, oh well, you're going to gain it all back because your genetics are going to make sure that you go back up to that previous weight. There is some, interesting observation with that. Obviously, we've talked about the stats before on weight regain, that more people than not do tend to regain lost weight and do tend to settle back at a higher weight. So there is a little bit of observation that squares with that, but not everybody. Not everybody. We do have some people who are able to lose weight and keep it off. And so if the body worked exactly like a thermostat, we wouldn't ever have people who can do significant weight change, but yet we do. Now, what is true that I liked about Raylene's point is we tend to keep settling higher. It does tend to be increasingly more difficult to settle back at a lower weight, because the body does defend against fat loss. And again, you kind of want to think about it from an evolution point of view that gaining weight really wasn't a problem. In fact, you could consider it advantageous when food was so scarce. And so we don't really have as much of a protective mechanism against gaining weight. We do have more of a protective mechanism against weight loss. And what happens is when we lose weight, we tend to have more appetite and more hunger. And one of the big players here is leptin. So leptin is a hormone that's released by your fat cells, and the more fat you have, the more leptin is released, and the more that you feel satisfied and you don't have as much hunger. But then if you start to lose weight, you start to lose fat, less leptin is produced, and therefore hunger increases. And this is why a lot of times people can't sustain the weight loss, is because they have too much hunger. What's also interesting about leptin is the leptin levels will change even if you haven't lost weight off the body, but yet your diet significantly changed. So for example, if you drastically cut calories, the leptin that is released will also decrease before necessarily you've lost weight, which is another reason why people might go on these crash diets, let's say, and be so hungry they can't stick to them, because there's this hormonal drive to eat and hormonal kind of protective mechanism against weight loss. And so this is a big reason why I don't recommend big caloric deficits, and why I have to make sure that you're filling up on really satisfying foods that we've talked about all of the time, because we have to go at a rate that is slow, that is a sustainable level of hunger, and to try to get after this long-term weight loss. And so I think it's good to think about set points as you don't have one genetically predetermined weight to be. Your genetics certainly influence a range of weights you could be, but then the environment, your habits in combination with your genetics determine exactly where you end up on that range.
All right. Last question we've got is from Chris. This is what he sent over. I think it would be great to do a podcast on energy drinks versus coffee and caffeine with pros and cons. Looking at energy drinks like Fit Aid and Pure Boost Energy Mix, they have around 100 milligrams of caffeine. Then there's Celsius, higher caffeine. So they're similar to coffee, no carbs, low calories, no sugar. For me, I like maybe 200 milligrams of caffeine throughout the day. I hate black coffee. So if I'm going to get a coffee, it's going to be a Starbucks macchiato with sugar, caramel, and milk, about 150 milligrams. Seems like a Fit Aid is a better option.
Yeah. One of the problems with energy drinks most of the time for most people is they're not getting the sugar-free. And so it's almost like sugar-sweetened beverages that we just have this huge whack of calories that we're getting, consume it so quickly, not satisfying. That's the problem. Conversely, here, Chris is talking about kind of the sweetener variety. What about that? I think it's fine. I think it's totally fine. I mean, it's kind of like drinking a Diet Coke. Typically, these energy drinks have more than Diet Coke. A Diet Coke is going to be around probably 60 milligrams of caffeine. And so as he stated here, some of them about 100. I do prefer Celsius, which has about 200 milligrams of caffeine. Yep. But yeah, it's just like having caffeine, and it's a fine enough add. I do agree that for most people, a sugar-free energy drink is going to be better than that Starbucks macchiato that he described because of all of the sugar and the extra calories. It's just like why Diet Coke can be a good option for people instead of a sugar-sweetened beverage. So I think it's fine. I think the only kind of caveat with the caffeine, and Chris is fine here, is just to kind of stay within the recommended daily amounts, which is up to about 400 milligrams of caffeine per day. So he's obviously fine staying around kind of the 200 level a day. Some of these energy drinks, they're up there. Like Celsius at 200, I mean, the can's only 12 ounces. You can easily down a few energy drinks a day, and you're very much over that 400 limit. And some of these have closer to 300. I'm not going to get the brands right, but some of them that I've seen in the gas station, they're over 300 milligrams of caffeine. So it's very easy if you get into drinking a lot of energy drinks and you're not paying attention to the caffeine that you can kind of go over that recommended amount of 400 per day. And I will say the information of the caffeine is on the can. It's typically actually just outside the nutrition label, and it's not often very obvious. So you're going to want to take a look at that before you get involved in drinking lots and lots of energy drinks.
Any particular issues with drinking that much caffeine other than perhaps it's going to keep you up later and that'll affect all sorts of things? Is there anything specific to caffeine? You know, we've talked about caffeine before, but anything that when you get up to those numbers, even if you get close to that 400, that's like, okay, here's the reason why you don't want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people within normal ranges, or not normal ranges, but like kind of a little excessively normal ranges, it's going to be more the jittery, the anxious stuff, the rapid heartbeat. But certainly at an excessive volume, it's just going to be too much. I think there was actually just something in the news about a 27-year-old who died who was just doing a ton of energy drinks because kind of a fitness influencer, always working out, pre-workout, caffeine, just too much on the heart. So there is going to be a certain amount at which it's just way too much. I think a lot of people will recognize when they're starting to trend in that direction with just that sort of anxious, again, jittery is... I've certainly felt that before on some deadlines and projects where I'm thinking, okay, I don't need any more caffeine right now. I got to switch to water.
All right, speaking of projects that may or may not have increased your daily consumption of caffeine, do make sure folks out there are checking out the 3 Pillars Method app, 3pillarsmethod.com to do that. And do make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you're listening to this so you don't miss another episode. EC and I will be back next week for a brand new episode of the Consistency Project podcast.